Hello, this is Darrell Castle with today's Castle Report. This is Friday, the 14th day of November in the year of our Lord 2025. Last Tuesday, the 11th, was Veterans Day here in America, or what they still call Armistice Day in Great Britain. I will be talking about that by using an interview of a British veteran named Alec Penstone that was given on British television and the viral result of his comments. Mr. Penstone was selected as the veteran to be interviewed and to represent all British veterans on the British television show Good Morning Britain. His interview was live, obviously intended to convey to the British public that the show, its hosts, and the network in general, just as patriotic and honoring of veterans as the general public. In other words, they intended to traffic from his honor and his willingness to serve in a time when service required great sacrifice. Mr. Penstone, now 100 years old, served in the British Navy on Arctic convoy duty. The convoys carried goods from Great Britain and America around the Arctic route to Russia. Without those convoys, Russia might have been defeated, knocked out of the war, and the 3 million men, 3,000 tanks, 4,000 aircraft committed by the Nazis to the defeat of Russia could have been used on the Western Front to oppose the D-Day landing. So it was vital service that Mr. Penstone did, yes, vital, but also very dangerous because ships were hunted by German submarines and German surface raiders. Being hit by a German torpedo or by naval gunfire was certain death in a freezing Arctic Ocean. But men like Mr. Penstone were there, willing to endure the conditions to prevail. I tell of his exploits to show you that the man was and is a genuine war hero, not just someone sitting in an office drinking coffee while the others were out in the mud and the blood. So the hosts of the show sought to bask in the honor and dignity of the man, and I suppose absorbed some of it onto themselves, but it just didn't go according to script. The question that was asked of him was, what are your thoughts on Remembrance Day and what does it mean for the country? The old sailor responded like this, quote, I can see in my mind's eye those rows and rows of white stones, all the hundreds of my friends, everybody else who gave their lives for what? The country of today? No, I'm sorry. The sacrifice wasn't worth the result that it is now, end quote. The female host was taken aback by the man's honesty, and she said, quote, oh, Alec, I'm sorry you feel like that, end quote. Perhaps Alec has some mental illness. Perhaps he has a touch of dementia. After all, he is 100 years old. The male host decided to give him a chance to redeem himself and explain his answer. He said, quote, what do you mean by that, though, end quote. Well, maybe this would give the man a chance to denounce excuse me, folks, to denounce all those people who have been protesting the fact that Great Britain, the country he fought for, is no longer British. If that is what they expected, he left them disappointed. He said, quote, what we fought for was our freedom. We find that even now it's a darn sight worse than when I fought for it, end quote. Yes, that was his answer, and the hosts were a little unprepared for it. I'm going to use a little poetic license here and say that he fought for Western civilization that it might endure. And with tears in his eyes, he explains and he knows that it has not. The host, in conclusion of the interview, said, quote, it's our job now, isn't it, to make it the country that you fought for, end quote. I will answer Mr. Penstone. I'll answer for him and say, no, that isn't your job, because your job is to make it the opposite of the country you fought for. I don't think you want this to be a Christian nation with traditions and people who defended that concept against Vikings, Romans, and Nazis, but that's what he fought for. Well, I have to put my own words in the mouth of this great centurion war hero who fought Nazi Germany to preserve his country's freedom, so I will give an account of why I think that today he is correct. Mr. Jefferson said in his declaration that when you make such charges, you must explain them. Quote, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind require that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation, end quote. I will then give some reasons why I think freedom here in America is not what it was and certainly not what it was intended to be. When people see what is happening in America, they know something's wrong. since they have experienced nothing but the globalist-dominated propaganda of what amounts to public education. They are given to grasp at a charismatic leader who promises relief through ideas as dumb as socialism. It works kind of like this, folks. They see that 90% of all wealth, and that might be a low estimate, is controlled by only 10% of the people. Again, those numbers might be low, probably a little low, but that is what the economists tell us. The young are propagandized, but that doesn't mean they're stupid. The charismatic leader tells them, we can just make everything free for you. We can make the 10% or less pay for it. The young suddenly realize that although they hardly have any of the wealth, they have more than 50% of the votes, and that gives them power, the power to attempt the looting. There is an old adage in economics that says money goes where it is treated the best, so anyone who has any money that will be looted by the charismatic leader flees to safer ground. They see the stormtroopers on the horizon. They flee before it is too late. In America, minorities have rights that can't legally be taken away by the majority. The majority looks around, concludes it can arrange things to discriminate against any group of people that it wants to. That's what all the redistricting of congressional districts have been about for the last 60 years, and what the drive for equity and egalitarianism has been about. It's all a global scheme to mold humanity into an amorphous mess that is easily controlled by charismatic leaders chosen and funded by them. It can't and won't work. It's also the opposite of the freedom that Mr. Penstone fought for. That is freedom of the individual to, excuse me, folks, again, to work, to study, to achieve to the limits of one's own merits, not to have a person's status in life, dictated by a centralized control mechanism. I could give examples of places socialism has been tried and failed all day long, but there's no time for that. I will just say that the new mayor of New York City is sometimes called a communist. But he is not a communist because that utopian dream is not achievable. Even Lenin and Stalin tried to achieve it, but they only got to an advanced form of socialism. Yes, Stalinism is just a form of socialism in its advanced state. Let me move on now to other destroyers of the American dream. They are destroyers of the individual and national freedom that Mr. Penstone fought for. They are examples of the surrender of independence upon which concept America was founded. Yes, since World War II at least, if not before, America has gradually come to be controlled by some type of globalist conglomerate. How else can you explain what I'm about to describe? The U.S. plans to build a military base in Israel at an estimated cost of about $500 million. That is the pre-building estimate. And of course, the actual cost will escalate because it always does. I could stop there and tell you that this idea is perhaps the most stupid idea ever conceived by the minds of people who are totally controlled by globalists. I need, however, to describe what seems to be happening, and of course, I still hold out hope. It won't happen, but it's underway as I speak. The base will be located in Israel along the Gaza Strip and will house several thousand American troops whose mission task is to maintain the ceasefire in the region. It is the result of a negotiated agreement between the U.S. and Israel. I have to stop and ask, what in the world is going on here? I just can't understand how and why American parents are supposed to send their children in harm's way because it's in some other country's best interest. This seems like absolute madness to me, and is proof positive that the president, and through him his entire administration, is totally under the control and domination of a foreign country and its advocates here in the U.S. Wait a minute, though. Wait a minute. Doesn't that violate every principle that this country was founded on and that hundreds of thousands have died to protect? Yes, it does, folks. It does. But we're doing it anyway. My guess is there won't be too many peeps from Congress about this on either side of the aisle. Why? Well, obviously they're controlled by the same lobby representing the same country that seems to have the president's full support. They line up at the microphone to compete and debate about who is the most pro-Israel among them. Woe to any member who fails this test, because he or she will be quickly out of office, or at the very least pushed into a no-influence corner of the room. Let's take a moment. Let's take a moment To take a 10,000-foot view of this, as they say, this base is supposed to house 10,000 troops. So to summarize, decades of American support, American money, American blood, going all the way back to 1948, Washington has destroyed at least 5 countries in the region. So now it is being tasked with the cost of rebuilding and rehabilitating the region and all its people, from ordinary people to insane terrorists. I'm going out on a limb here, folks, I know, but I'm going to say that when all those MAGA voters voted in the last presidential election, they thought they were voting for America. America first, they called it. They voted for what was in America's best interest, not the best interest of a foreign country. This is complete madness. I can't think of another word for it. I'm in a state of disbelief, folks, coupled with sadness, topped off with extreme anger, so I guess that makes me an extremist. Finally, folks, do you think that if the nation channeled all this energy, all this brain power, all this money, all the lives spent fighting for the interest of some people on the other side of the world, it would do some good right here in New York City and Memphis and Los Angeles and, in fact, in all 50 states? I think it would, folks. And therefore, I conclude and I submit to you today that Alec Penstone is right. At least that's the way I see it. Until next time, folks, this is Darrell Castle. Thanks for listening.